5 fitting tips for beginner sewists. Listen, watch the video. It's gonna help you. All right, let's go. Hi guys, Mimi G here. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, welcome. I am a sewing influencer and a content creator, and today I'm going to be talking about 5 tips to help you sew better fitting garments. Now, these 5 tips are based more for beginners, okay? Because we have a lot of beginners that have a lot of problems sewing patterns that fit them properly. So I jotted down 5 things that I think are super helpful, okay? And that will get you started on sewing better fitting garments. So I wrote them down. I got things so I don't forget what I was talking about. Okay, these are super simple things that you can learn to do very easily. The very first one is taking accurate measurements. Now on the pattern envelope, you are going to have your bust, waist, and hip measurements, okay? That's gonna be given to you on what we call the body measurements chart. Now that is how you initially select the pattern that you're going to buy. And when I say buy, I mean because patterns come in various sizes, okay? So this one is 6 through 14. So there's another envelope that's 16 through 20 or 22 or whatever it is. And if it comes in extended sizing, then there's another envelope with another set of sizes. So if you're at the store, okay, and you're looking for the pattern, you're like, oh, I don't know what size to get. You look at the back and you look at the body measurements chart. That's going to tell you what the bust, waist, and hip is, and then you match that up according to you. Now that doesn't mean that's the pattern size you're going to cut. Okay, I'm going to do a whole nother video on this. Okay, so I'm just going to touch on this real quickly, real lightly. You know what I'm saying? Just a little dabble. Okay, that doesn't mean that because the body measurements here have me falling under a 16, that's what I'm going to cut. And I'm going to explain why in just a second. But I thought I would show you really quickly how to accurately take your bust, waist, and hip measurement. Okay, so I have on like my little workout, whatever on. So you wanna make sure that whatever you have on is not bulky. Okay, so don't try taking your bust, waist, and hip measurement over like a sweater, okay? Hell, not even a loose fitting t-shirt, okay? Put on a sports bra or your regular bra or whatever, or a workout something, and take the measurement at the fullest part of your bust, okay? Now, you wanna make sure that that tape measure goes all the way around your body and that it is level to the floor. You don't want it to be like this. So turn around or do this in front of a mirror so that you can look at the back of yourself and make sure that that tape measure is level with the floor and it's not dipping in the back or going up in the back, and that you're gonna get an inaccurate measurement. Now, for your waist measurement, you might find it handy to get a piece of elastic, tie it loosely around your waist, okay, not super loose so it's falling, but snug enough that it's not gonna move. Wiggle around a little bit in it, and wherever that settles is your natural waist. For me, I prefer to put the finger on the side of my body and bend. Wherever that bend is, that's where my natural waistline is, and that's where I take my waist measurement. Again, make sure that you are level all the way around and it's not up or down along the back or crooked. You want to make sure that it's level all the way around. Now, you're not pulling tight, but you're also not doing it too loose. You should be able to get at least one finger in between your body and the tape measure. Now, for your hip measurement, you want to measure along the fullest part of that part of the body, okay? Now that could be different for many of us because depending on your body, you might carry it higher or lower, or if you have a front tummy, that's also going to affect that measurement. So looking at the side of my body in the mirror, I'm gonna place the tape measure along the fullest part of my lower body. And again, making sure that that tape measure is level to the ground, I'm going to take that measurement. I write these measurements down and I take them again every couple of months because our body changes and gravity hits when you hit a certain age. You know what I'm saying? So you want to make sure that you have accurate measurements and don't go based on something you did last year, okay? Retake them measurements. All right. Now, another thing that I think is really useful, and people hate doing it because they think it's a waste of time, and ain't nobody. Anyway, take time to make a muslin. That is a test garment of whatever it is that you're going to sew up. I'm going to show you an example now of what that looks like. So I'm currently working on McCall's 8553. Okay, I'm making this one here. And so I want to make sure that it's going to fit before I get started. Now, I'm going to be honest. I just picked this one to show you an example of because it's currently what I'm sewing. But I normally would not make a muslin for this because it's not necessarily a fitted garment and I can pretty much tell that I'm okay. But I've been sewing a long time. If you have not been sewing a long time, if you are new to this sewing game, then chances are you don't know if this is going to fit you based on the measurements or the size you chose because you probably don't accurately know how to choose a size just yet. Make sense? So it's a good idea to cut out the front and the back, sew it together at the shoulders, at the side seams. Put in your darts, okay, because you want to make sure that the darts are pointing in the right direction, okay? You don't want your nipple up here, your dart down here, okay? Okay, so you want to make sure that you do at least the darts, the side seams, and the shoulders, and it's really important that wherever that closure is that you give yourself a guide. So this has a center front zip, which I know I'm gonna end up probably turning in at least 5/8 of an inch. And so I made a stitching guide on it and then folded and pressed it so that when I am folding over to pin as I am testing myself, I want to make sure that I'm overlapping the correct amount and not just willy-nilly folding over thinking I'm covering 5/8 of an inch and I'm really not. Okay, you want to be accurate. Now I'm going to look for things like, is it falling correctly at the shoulder, right? Do I need to take it in much? After measuring and putting on my sloper, I noticed that I could probably carve off about a 1/4 inch because it's gathers. I want my gathers to sit here, right on that shoulder. I don't want my gathers to be here because then it's gonna and you don't want that. So I know I'm probably gonna take a 1/4 inch off of that. Now the rest of the body fit perfectly fine. There was no real adjustment that I needed to make to the bodice itself. But now I need to check my sleeves because I have short arms, and 9 times out of 10, I always have to alter the sleeve pattern. So these are adjustments that you can learn to make in the very beginning that are pretty basics. So let's recap before I move on. The first tip is take proper measurements, at least your bust, waist, and hip. The second tip is to make a test garment, a muslin. This doesn't mean you have to sew up the entire garment like you saw in the video. You just need a basic shell of that pattern piece to make sure that it's going to fit in the places that you need it to fit. And part of making those adjustments means testing things like the sleeve because like I said, I have short arms and I always have to shorten my sleeves. So I'm going to talk about a couple of basic things in just a second, but I want to move on to understanding ease. So there are 2 types of ease, okay? There's design ease and then there's wearing ease. Now, wearing ease is just the amount of ease that is added to the pattern to allow for movement. Meaning if there was no eave in the armhole, you wouldn't be able to pull your arm up and down or move. You'd be like this, okay? If there was no ease in the waist or in the hips, you wouldn't be able to move. So this is called wearing ease. It's just a bit of ease that is added to the garment for comfort. And there are standards that are added to like the bust, hip, waist, things like that. Now, design ease is what you really have to focus on because design ease is based on whatever that design is. So this pattern here has a significant amount of ease, design ease. It's the amount of ease that is added to the garment so that it drapes, flows, falls on the body the way it's meant to. Think of fitted button-up shirt versus a caftan, okay? The caftan has a lot of design ease, right? That's what makes it flowy and big and all of that stuff. Those are the differences. So when I'm looking at a pattern and selecting my size, I look at the back of the body measurements because I want to see, okay, technically, my bust, which is the most important part of this garment that I'm worried about anyway, because the skirt is super loose fitting and it's gathered at the waist, so I don't need to worry about that, but I do want to make sure that it fits along the bust. So the bust measurement, body measurement given here is a 38. Okay, well, I'm a 37, right? My bust is a 37. So I could technically go with, okay, 16 is a 38. I know that there's going to be some ease in this, which will give me enough comfort. I like my clothes a little more fitted. I don't like so much a loose fit. So let me see. So let me go down from the size 16. I see that the bust body measurement is 38. Now let's scroll all the way down. And I see that the finished garment measurements, which is always what you should be looking at, says that the bust on that 16 is a 43 and a half. That's way too much ease for me, and it's going to be swimming, right? In that fit that you saw with my muslin, that's a size 12 that I cut. And it gave me plenty of ease along the bust and along the waist, and it fit perfectly. Now, had I cut the 16 because the body measurement said it was closer to my bust and not taken into account the design ease and looked at the finished garment measurement, I would have ended up with a garment that was really big and looked really ugly on me, okay? So we want to make sure that we always look at the finished garment measurement. So not long ago, this wasn't always given on the pattern envelopes, okay? Sometimes it was like length from neck to back, and I'm like, who cares? When I came on to DG, that's one of the things that we made sure that we changed. So every pattern that comes out now has bust, waist, and hip. If it doesn't have hip, it's because you don't need to know the hip on the finished garment measurement because it doesn't matter because it's a super full garment. But if it's something that needs to fit along the bust and the waist, then you're gonna have a finished bust, finished waist measurement. If it needs to fit along the bust, waist, and hip, then you're gonna get a bust, waist, and hip finished garment measurement. So let's do some math, right? So if I'm a 37, but a 38 is a 16, and so that would have been okay, right? And the finished garment measurement on the 16 is 43 and a half. So that's going to be like 5.5 additional inches of ease that is put into that bodice. So there's no way I'm going to cut a 16, right? I'm going to cut a size 12 because the finished garment measurement on the size 12 on that bust is 39 and a half, which gives me 2.5 inches of ease along the bust, which is perfect. That's plenty for me, right? I don't want anything more than that. You saw in the video with me wearing my muslin that it fit pretty good at that bust area. There was no pulling. It was comfortable. It wasn't too big. It's going to give me the look that I want and still keep the look and design of the garment. And that's perfectly good. So you want to make sure that you start to understand the difference between what the body measurement is and then to go and look for the finished garment measurement so that you can see whether or not it has too much ease, and you probably will end up going down a size, or in this case, I went down 2 sizes, or you may need to go up, right? Depending on the garment, the design, if it's meant to be fitted or loose, all of those things need to be taken into account. I am going to do a full video on talking about selecting your size, but that's the gist of it. That's the most important thing to keep in mind. Now, there are small adjustments that you can make as a beginner sewist to start understanding things like using the shortening and lengthening line on your pattern pieces. These are normally given on the bodice, on the sleeve, on the skirt. If you need to lengthen it or shorten it, then you slash along that line and then you go ahead and move either up and tape or down and add paper in between however much you needed to slash and spread. Now for my sleeve, I knew it was going to be too long because my sleeves are always too long. And most times I'm removing anywhere from 3 to 4 inches. Now it does depend on how much gathering or bulk you want here, right? I didn't necessarily have to take down as much as I did, but I didn't want a whole lot of like bunching up right here, which is what would happen once I attach the cuff. So I wanted to try on the sleeve and I didn't feel like cutting and sewing it. So this is what we call a tissue fitting. I overlapped my seam allowances by 5/8 of an inch because I know that's what the seam allowance is. And then I slipped it on to see where it was going to end. And as you can see, it was very long. And I needed to take into account that there is a cuff attached to the bottom of the sleeve. So if I add the cuff, that's going to give me another 2.5 inches of length. So I went ahead and pinned the cuff to the sleeve so that I can see what that was actually going to look like. And as you can see from the video, it was long. So I knew I needed to take up at least 3 inches, if not more, of that pattern. So what I do is I go fold it over and I pin in place just so I could test fit before I slash anything. And then I went and tried it on again so I can see, is that good? Once I add the cuff, that's going to give me plenty, but it's not going to be too short. Once it was good, then I went ahead and slashed along that line, overlapped it, making sure that I had marked where I had taped, right? So I didn't have to do that work all over again. And then I taped the new length in place, but you'll notice that on the sides now, the pattern is off, right? Because we've now overlapped to shorten it. And so what you want to do is you want to add that space that was taken up on the side, but what you don't want to do is take away anything from the sleeve at the top, right? Because then you're going to end up with a sleeve that doesn't fit your armhole. So you want to leave that intact. You just want to add where there's space, but I also don't want to add space to the width of the wrist. So I just used a little bit of paper and then gradually went from where I needed to down to the bottom of the sleeve and just filled it in with paper. Those are quick and easy adjustments that you can make. If you're working on a garment and you know that you're between sizes, let's say you're a 12 at the waist and a 14 at the hip, then what you can do is you can go from that 12 line and then gradually grade out to the next line, which is a 14, to accommodate for your hips. Now, grading between sizes, that's a whole nother video that I can do. I can add it to my list. The list is growing, y'all, but I can add it to the list because I think that's just something that most sewists probably have to do. I don't know, but it seems like, you might fall in between sizes. And so that's something that is probably very useful to people. Now, the last tip is to fit as you go. I've talked about this, seems like in every video that I've done in the last couple of weeks, but I fit as I go, meaning if I was sewing that muslin, if that was the actual fabric, I would have done the same thing. I would have sewn the shoulders, made my darts, sewn the side seams if it was out of the actual fabric I was making. And I would have stopped and tried it on and said, do I need to take it in more at the sides? Is it falling where I want at the shoulder? Is my bust point where I want it? Everything looks good? Great. No, I have to make adjustments. I do them now. I take it in, I move whatever I need to move, and then we move on to the next part. And then I do that in between almost every step of sewing, right? I do the bodice, I try it on. I attach the sleeve, I try it on. I attach the next sleeve, and then I move on to attaching the skirt. And then you want to, if it was a fitted skirt, I want to make sure that it fits properly before I attach it to the bodice. So all of these things are things that you take into account as you're sewing, and that is fitting as you go. Now, I know I yapped a lot, and I hope that some of that was helpful, but I did put together a downloadable PDF with all of the tips that I have included and a couple more for you that you can download in the description box below. I hope that these things have helped you. Remember that you're not going to learn how to do all of these things immediately. Some take practice. So as you start sewing, take these 5 tips and apply them to your garment so that you can see if at the end of it, you get a better fitting garment. All right, let's recap. So you want to take correct body measurements, at least bust, waist, and hip. You want to make sure that you do a test fit garment or a muslin to make sure that anything that's going to stand out, you can see it right away before you actually start cutting into your good fabric. 3, you want to start to understand ease, finished garment measurements, and how to select that size. 4, you want to make sure to do any small adjustments ahead of time, like trying on the tissue as you saw me do with the sleeve, and try it on to make sure that the length of that sleeve is good. And if not, you can alter your lengthening and shortening lines before you actually cut any fabric. Or if you need to grade in between sizes, the time to do it is as you are cutting your pattern piece, not your fabric. And the last tip is to make sure that you are fitting as you go and you don't just sew an entire garment without stopping to test fit and then realize the garment doesn't fit you at all. So take these few tips, apply them as you're sewing. I hope they help. If there's anything else you guys would like to see me talk about, leave it in the comments below. As usual, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, peace.